The worst part about living with someone you secretly want is not the mornings, it's the nights. Because when the lights go off, your brain becomes a cruel playwright, staging fantasies so vivid you wake up sweating, ashamed, and yet hungry for more. That was my life from the first week Ethan moved in. I had told myself I was fine with it. Roommates were just roommates. He needed a cheap place close to the hospital, and I needed someone to split the rent in a city that eats paychecks like candy. It should have been simple. But nothing about Ethan was simple. The first night, he came home at 2 a.m., smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, his shirt sticking to his skin from the rain. He apologized for waking me, his voice low and husky, and my traitor brain painted a scene I didn't ask for, him leaning over my bed, whispering something entirely different. I laughed it off in the morning. But by the third night, the dreams started. Dreams where his hand brushed mine and lingered. Dreams where he looked at me not with polite detachment but with the heat of someone who wanted me just as badly. Dreams that ended with me waking up breathless, heart pounding against ribs that felt too small. And every morning, there he was, real, mundane, pouring cereal into a chipped bowl, yawning, stretching like the world didn't just implode in my subconscious hours earlier. The sickest part, I didn't just want him, I liked him. Too much. Ethan had this awkward, infuriating charm that made it impossible not to care. He was brilliant in ways that scared me, patient with people in a way I could never be, and so maddeningly oblivious to the fact that his laugh could gut me better than any scalpel. He was the type who would hold the subway door for a stranger but forget his own umbrella. The type who left notes on the fridge like, "Don't forget to eat dinner, your body needs it." I wanted to keep the line between us clean. But lines blur when you live in a 2-bedroom apartment with thin walls and shared silences. That first month, I told myself this was temporary. He'd finish his internship, move out, and I'd go back to sleeping without a storm of need tearing me apart. But deep down, I already knew I wasn't just dreaming him. I was falling. The apartment became a stage for every possible temptation. In the mornings, he'd leave his stethoscope on the counter, right next to my coffee mug. I'd pretend not to notice how his fingers brushed mine when we both reached for the sugar jar. On Sundays, when he finally had a few hours off, we'd end up on the couch with a stupid sitcom playing. He'd laugh with his whole chest, unguarded, while I stared at the way his smile cracked me open. I learned things about him no one else did. That he couldn't stand the smell of peaches. That he hummed under his breath when he studied, like his brain needed a soundtrack. That he carried a little notebook, not for medicine, but for scraps of poetry he wrote when the nights were too heavy. And yet, Ethan never crossed the line. Not once. Which left me stranded alone with my dreams, each one blurring the boundary between reality and fantasy until I couldn't tell where I stood. The cruelest night came on his birthday. I had baked him a terrible cake, lopsided. Too sweet, but he laughed like it was the best thing anyone had ever made. We ended up drinking cheap wine straight from the bottle, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the city buzzing outside our window. He told me things that night about losing his dad, about the crushing pressure of saving lives when he barely knew how to save himself. His voice cracked once, just once, and I wanted so badly to reach across, hold his hand, promise him he wasn't alone. But I didn't. Instead, I went to bed and dreamed of kissing him until morning light turned fantasy into shame. But it was getting harder to hide. He started noticing my silences, the way I lingered too long, the way I avoided his eyes after a dream too vivid to shake off. One evening, after a brutal shift, he collapsed on the couch, head tilted back, shirt half open, his throat exposed. "You okay?" I asked. My voice didn't sound like mine. He cracked one eye open, a tired smile playing at his lips. You always ask me that. Because you're always exhausted. Yeah, but no one else asks. The air thickened between us. He looked at me for a second too long, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he knew, that he could see every forbidden thought flickering across my face. So I did what I always did. I broke the moment with a joke. You look like you're about to become one with that couch. Should I call the hospital and tell them they lost a doctor? He chuckled, low and rough, and the sound carved into me. Intern. He corrected. Not a doctor yet. But to me, he was already too much of everything. The breaking point came quietly. It was a Thursday night. Rain hammered the windows, thunder rolling in like a warning. I was up late, trying to finish work, when Ethan stumbled into the apartment, soaked, trembling from more than just the storm. Without a word, he dropped his bag and leaned against the wall, chest heaving. His eyes were glassy, his hands shaking. What happened? I rushed over, heart in my throat. He looked at me, something raw in his gaze. I lost a patient tonight. First one. She was just a kid. The words broke in the middle, jagged and sharp. I froze. He was unraveling right in front of me, and I didn't know what was allowed. Hugging him felt too much. Not hugging him felt cruel. So I stood there, useless, while he slid down the wall, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, twice, before he bit back the sound. And I couldn't take it anymore. I sat beside him, close enough that our arms brushed. I didn't say anything. I just stayed there, letting him breathe, letting the storm inside him pour out. For the first time, our silence wasn't filled with tension, it was filled with truth. And God help me, I wanted him more than ever. That was the night I realized my dreams weren't just dreams. They were bleeding into reality. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted them too. The storm outside eased by dawn, but the storm inside the apartment stayed. Ethan barely spoke the next day. He left for his shift with a faint nod, the circles under his eyes darker than I had ever seen them. When he came back, he looked even more hollow, as if some part of him hadn't returned from the hospital at all. I wanted to fix it, to say the right words. But how do you heal someone whose whole life is about healing others? So I cooked. Pathetic. I know. Pasta that was too salty. Garlic bread that burned on one side. I set it all on the table and waited for him like I was waiting for judgment. He came in, dropped his bag, and froze when he saw the food. What's all this? His voice was hoarse, wary. Dinner, I said. Don't get too excited. Half of it is barely edible. For a moment, the weight in his eyes lifted. His lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. You made this, for me. I shrugged, trying to look casual while my chest was on fire. We can call it an experiment. If you survive, maybe I'll keep cooking. He sat across from me, and we ate in silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was softer, safer, like he was letting me hold a piece of his grief without asking for permission. Halfway through, he put his fork down and rubbed his temples. I can't get her face out of my head. The kid. It's like she's everywhere. And I keep thinking, maybe I missed something. Maybe if I had noticed earlier. You can't do that to yourself. I said quickly, too quickly. You did what you could. You're not. I stopped, choking on the truth I almost said. You're not God. But Ethan was staring at me, his eyes sharp in the low light. You really believe that? Yes, I said, firmer this time. I do. He looked at me for so long I thought I'd shatter under it. Then he nodded, slow, and went back to eating. That night, I didn't dream. I didn't have to. The days blurred after that. Ethan buried himself in work, staying out later, sleeping less. But something between us had shifted. He started sitting closer on the couch. Our conversations stretched longer, even when neither of us had the energy for words. Once, when he fell asleep mid-sentence, his head tipped onto my shoulder. I didn't move. I stayed there, holding my breath, until his alarm jolted him awake. He apologized, embarrassed. I lied and said I barely noticed. But the truth, my shoulder burned where his head had been. My chest ached like something permanent had changed. One Friday night, the apartment filled with laughter that wasn't ours. Ethan had brought home a few fellow interns, and suddenly our quiet space was loud with beer bottles clinking, music thumping, people spilling onto our couch. I tried to blend in, to play the good roommate, but watching Ethan with them hurt more than I expected. He laughed easily, his guard lowered, his hand brushing against a woman's arm in a way that made my stomach twist. I told myself it was fine, that I had no claim on him. But jealousy is a vicious thing, it doesn't care about logic. Later, when most of them left, the woman stayed behind, lingering. I caught her hand grazing Ethan's as they stood by the door. I retreated to my room, slammed the door too hard, and pressed my back against it like I could shut the world out. My chest felt tight, my throat raw. I hated myself for wanting what wasn't mine, for dreaming of someone who might never look at me that way. But then I heard Ethan's voice, low, hesitant. Hey, thanks for coming. But I think I just need some sleep. Early shift tomorrow. The door clicked. Silence followed. I froze. My pulse roared in my ears. He had sent her away. A second later, there was a knock on my door. You okay? Ethan's voice, muffled. I scrambled, wiping my face though I hadn't realized I'd been crying. Yeah, fine. The door creaked open. He leaned against the frame, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. You disappeared. Thought maybe I scared you off with the crowd. I'm not great with parties, I admitted, especially not in my own apartment. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. My room suddenly felt too small, too intimate. Sorry, he said softly. I didn't think. I wanted to tell him it wasn't the party that bothered me. It was the way he smiled at someone else. The way my chest caved when I thought I might lose even the dream of him. But I couldn't. So I just nodded. It's fine. He studied me, his brow furrowing. You sure? Yes. A lie. But he let it go. He always did. The weeks stretched into months. We danced on the edge of something dangerous, never naming it, never touching it. Until one night, I couldn't keep it in anymore. We were both up late. Him reading over notes. Me pretending to work but mostly staring at the way his hair fell into his eyes. He sighed, shutting his book with a snap. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. He said. About medicine. About everything. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I haven't had a life in months. Haven't seen my mom. Haven't felt like myself. It's like the hospital owns me. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. So what keeps you going? He turned his head then, meeting my eyes in a way that rooted me to the spot. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. People. The right people. The room tilted. My breath caught. Was he talking about me? God, I wanted it so badly. But before I could say anything, his phone buzzed, dragging him back. He glanced at it, muttered something about a patient, and just like that, the moment slipped through my fingers. I sat there long after he left, my heart pounding, my body screaming at me for staying silent. Because silence was safe, and safe was killing me. But silence never lasts forever. 2 nights later, Ethan came home drunk. Not sloppy. Not wild, just unsteady enough that his walls had crumbled. He leaned on the doorframe, grinning when he saw me on the couch. "Hey," he slurred. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said carefully. "Rough night." "Celebration," he said, stumbling forward. "Finished a brutal rotation. Thought I earned it." He collapsed beside me, his head lolling against the couch. His laugh was soft, fragile. "God, I'm tired." I didn't move. Couldn't. Because his hand had landed on mine, heavy and warm. I froze. My pulse spiked, and then didn't pull away. His eyes fluttered shut, his thumb brushing my skin like an accident that lingered too long. "You're good to me," he murmured. "Better than I deserve." I thought I might break. Right there, in that moment, with his hand on mine and his words cracking me open. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice trembling. His eyes opened, hazy, searching. "What?" The truth clawed its way up my throat. 3 words, burning, begging to be free. But I couldn't. Not like this. Not when he was too drunk to mean it, too lost to remember. So I stayed silent, letting him fall asleep against me. My heart beat a war in my chest. Every thud a reminder of what I was too afraid to say. That night, I didn't dream. I didn't have to. Reality was already too close to breaking. Morning came like nothing had happened, though my body remembered every detail. The heat of his hand over mine. The way his voice had cracked when he called me good. But Ethan. He moved through the apartment like the night hadn't existed. No mention. No hesitation. Just coffee, cereal, and a rushed goodbye before another shift. I told myself it was better this way. That he probably didn't remember. That it meant nothing. But the truth was gnawing at me if I kept pretending. I'd drown. It happened 3 days later. He came home past midnight again. But this time he wasn't drunk. He was furious. He slammed his bag down on the table, his hands shaking, his face pale with exhaustion and something darker. "I can't keep doing this," he muttered, pacing the room. I sat up from the couch, startled. "Ethan." He ran both hands through his hair, pulling until I thought it might hurt. "I'm losing myself. Every damn day. I patch up people who are breaking apart. And I come home and he stopped, swallowing hard. "I don't even know who I am outside that hospital anymore." "You're you," I said, my chest tightening. "You're the guy who hums when he studies, who writes poetry in secret, who laughs at the dumbest sitcom jokes. That's who you are." He froze, eyes locking on mine. "You notice all that?" The words hung between us like a live wire. "Yes," I whispered. Something broke in his face then, something raw, desperate. He stepped closer, the air crackling with tension, until we were inches apart. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, his voice low, almost accusing. "Because I dream of you. Because you're the only thing that makes sense in my life. Because I love you." The words surged up my throat, choking me, but fear shoved them back down. Because you matter, I said instead. His breath hitched. For a heartbeat, I thought he would close the distance, that every dream I'd had was about to become reality. But then his phone buzzed, sharp and cruel, shattering the moment. He tore his gaze away, grabbed his bag, and muttered something about a patient. And just like that, he was gone. The next few days were torture. He avoided me, or maybe I avoided him. The silence grew teeth, biting every time our eyes met. But one night, I found him in the kitchen, sitting on the floor with his back against the fridge, staring at nothing. You okay? I asked softly. No, he said, his voice breaking. I sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, steady and unyielding. Finally, he whispered, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. With medicine. With anything. You don't have to have it all figured out, I said. You just have to keep going. He turned his head, studying me in a way that made my skin prickle. And what about you? What are you doing? The question cut deeper than I expected. I didn't have an answer, not one I could say out loud. I don't know either, I admitted. His eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like we were both standing on the edge of something dangerous, something real. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. He had a brutal night shift, and I stayed awake waiting for him. When he walked in, he looked destroyed, eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumped, his whole body trembling from exhaustion. Without thinking, I stood and caught him as he nearly stumbled. Ethan, he collapsed against me, burying his face in my shoulder. His breath was hot, shaky. I can't do this alone, he whispered. You're not alone, I said, holding him tighter than I should have. He pulled back then, his eyes shining with something wild. Then tell me why it feels like I am. The words ripped me open. I couldn't stop myself. Because you don't let anyone in, I snapped, voice shaking. You carry everything until you break. And I sit here, night after night, watching you fall apart. And I can't, God, Ethan, I can't keep pretending I don't care. His face went still. His breath caught. What are you saying? He asked, barely a whisper. My heart pounded, my hands trembling. I'm saying I stopped, choking on the truth. Fear clawed at me, but the dam had already broken. I'm saying I want more than this. More than being just your roommate. More than pretending I don't. But before I could finish, his lips crashed against mine. The kiss was desperate, messy, full of every unspoken word we had swallowed for months. His hands clutched at me like he was drowning, and I kissed him back like he was the air I had been gasping for. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead pressed against mine, his chest heaving, he whispered, I've wanted this. I've wanted you. I didn't know how to say it. My world spun. Relief and terror tangled in my chest. Then say it now, I begged. His eyes burned into mine. I want you. And for the first time, my dreams and reality were the same. But happiness never comes easy. The next morning, he was gone before I woke. No note. No trace of what happened, except the phantom of his kiss lingering on my lips. The day stretched endlessly, every second weighed down by doubt. Had it been real? Had it been a mistake? When he finally came home, his face was pale, his jaw tight. We need to talk, he said. And just like that, my stomach dropped. We need to talk. The words cut sharper than any scalpel. Ethan stood stiff, his hands buried in the pockets of his scrub pants, his eyes fixed on the floor. I felt my throat dry up, panic clawing at me. About last night, I asked, though I already knew. He nodded once, still not meeting my eyes. My chest caved in. Do you regret it? Silence stretched, unbearable. Finally, he lifted his gaze, and the look in his eyes nearly knocked me over. Pain, longing, fear. I don't regret it, he said, his voice hoarse. But I don't know if I can handle it. The words lodged in my ribs like broken glass. Handle what? Me? No, God. No. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. It's not you. It's everything. The hospital owns me. My brain's a mess. I don't even know who I am half the time. And now he stopped, shaking his head. Now I've dragged you into it. You didn't drag me. I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. I chose this. I chose you. His jaw clenched. And what happens when I mess it up? When I disappoint you? When I'm too tired to give you anything but scraps of myself? Then I'll take the scraps, I whispered. The room went still. His eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. Then he shut them, like he was bracing himself against the world. I don't want to hurt you, he said. Too late, I muttered, before I could stop myself. He flinched. I turned away, pressing my palms into my eyes. I hated the way my chest ached, the way my voice cracked. Ethan, I've been hurting for months. Every night I dream of you, and every morning I wake up pretending it means nothing. And then last night you kissed me, and for once just one seat felt real. And now you're telling me it's too much, that I should just go back to silence. His footsteps crossed the room slowly. I felt him behind me, close enough that the heat of his body bled into mine, but not touching. You dream of me? He asked, barely audible. I froze. The confession had slipped out before I realized. Yes, I breathed. For a moment, nothing. Then, a trembling exhale. I dream of you too, he whispered. I turned, stunned. His eyes were glassy. His lips parted like he'd just given away a secret he'd sworn to bury. Then why are we doing this to ourselves? I asked, desperate. He looked at me with something that might have been love, or maybe just fear wearing love's face. Because wanting you feels like the only real thing in my life right now. And that terrifies me. His voice cracked on the last word. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Our fingers threaded together like they belonged. For a moment, it was enough. But the universe never lets happiness linger. 2 weeks later, the hospital swallowed Ethan whole. 12-hour shifts became 16. He came home past midnight, collapsed on the couch, and sometimes didn't even make it to his room. I covered him with a blanket, left water on the table, touched his hair only when I knew he was too far gone to notice. We barely spoke, but the silence had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy, thick with all the things we'd said and all the things we were still afraid to. Then came the night that broke us. He stumbled in, pale, shaking, his scrubs stained. I rushed over, panic spiking. Ethan, are you hurt? No, he rasped, dropping onto the couch. Not mine. Not my blood. His eyes were wild, unfocused. There was a boy. Car accident. We tried everything. His voice cracked. He died in my hands. I knelt in front of him, gripping his knees. Ethan, listen to me. But he shoved my hands away, standing so suddenly I almost fell back. No. Don't try to fix me. You can't. Ethan, I can't be this person for you. He snapped, his voice sharp with grief. I can't be your dream guy when I'm falling apart every night. I can't give you what you want. The words gutted me. I never asked you to be perfect, I said, my throat burning. I just want you, even if you're breaking, especially then. But he shook his head, tears streaking his face. You don't understand. I'll destroy you. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't let that happen. He grabbed his keys, his bag, and before I could stop him, he was gone. The door slammed. The echo lingered long after his footsteps vanished down the hall. The apartment became a tomb. His absence filled every corner. The couch where he'd fallen asleep. The mug he always left by the sink. The faint scent of his cologne that clung to the hallway. Days passed. Then a week. No word. I went to work. Came home. Stared at the door like a fool. Hoping. Praying. Breaking. And the night I woke to a knock. My heart stopped. I opened the door to find Ethan, drenched from rain, shaking, his eyes hollow but alive. I'm sorry, he said, his voice raw. I tried to stay away. I thought it would protect you. But all it did was kill me. Couldn't breathe. Ethan, I don't know how to do this. He confessed. I don't know how to be with someone and still survive this job. But I know I can't not be with you. The rain dripped from his hair, his clothes clinging to his skin. He looked wrecked, ruined and more beautiful than I'd ever seen him. I reached for him, pulling him inside, pulling him into me. His lips crashed against mine, desperate and wet with rain and tears. This time, there was no hesitation, no silence, no lies, only us. That night, in the dim light of our apartment, we broke every wall we had built. And for the first time, my dreams didn't end when I woke. The first snow of December fell thick against the New York skyline, softening the noise of the city into something almost tender. I stood at the window of our apartment, watching the street lamps glow in halos of white. Behind me, the kettle whistled, and soft footsteps padded across the kitchen floor. Hot chocolate. Noah's voice called out, steady now in ways that it hadn't been months ago. He had grown into his skin here, grown into us, with way too many marshmallows. Just how you like it. I turned, and there he was, his hair a mess from a long shift, scrubs wrinkled, but his smile warm enough to outshine every light outside. I thought of how far we had come, the fights, the silence, the guilt that once sat like a wall between us. How I had pushed him away when my fear of love felt larger than love itself. How he had almost left. And how, against all odds, we had chosen each other anyway. He handed me the mug, our fingers brushing, lingering. Even the smallest touch felt different now. Not tentative. Not borrowed. Ours. The night moved quietly around us. He sank onto the couch, pulling me with him until I was resting against his chest. His heartbeat was slow, steady, as if whispering that time had finally granted us permission to be still. You know, I murmured, tracing the line of his wrist with my thumb. I used to dream about this exact moment. Sitting here with you. Snow outside. Nothing hanging over us. Just peace. He chuckled low in his throat. Guess your dreams weren't lying after all. Yeah. I whispered, smiling. They were just waiting for me to stop being so afraid. Noah tilted his head, pressing his lips against my hair. And are you still afraid? I thought about Itho the world could still be cruel, how people could still look at us and not understand. But then I thought about him, about the way his laughter felt like home, about how he held me without apology. Not anymore, I said. Not as long as I have you. A week later, the hospital threw its annual holiday party. It was loud, crowded, shimmering with tinsel and cheap wine. Noah was caught up in conversations with colleagues, his face glowing with the joy of someone who had earned his place here. I watched him from across the room, pride swelling in my chest. When he finally pulled me into a quieter hallway, his hands still smelled faintly of antiseptic and pine from the decorations. His eyes searched mine like he was gathering courage. "There's something I need to say," he began. His voice wavered, but only slightly. "Something I've been holding in because I didn't know if we were ready. But I can't. I don't want to wait anymore." I swallowed, pulse quickening. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out not a ring, but a folded piece of paper creased from being carried too long. He placed it in my hand. I opened it. It was a list. Messy handwriting. Things I want to do with him. The first line, wake up next to him without worrying what comes after. The last, grow old and still argue about who makes the better pancakes. Tears blurred my vision before I could even finish reading. "Noah." He took both my hands in his. "I don't have a ring. Not yet. But I have this. And I have you. And if you'll let me, I want to spend every day making sure you never doubt that." I laughed through the tears, shaking my head. "You idiot. You think I need a ring to know I want forever with you." And then I kissed him fiercely, recklessly, like the world outside that hallway didn't exist. Winter deepened. Life settled into something steady, though never boring. He worked impossible shifts, came home exhausted, and I found ways to keep the apartment warm, to keep us whole. Some nights, he would collapse beside me and whisper half-asleep confessions. "I almost lost someone today. I thought of you every second. I'm so glad I came home to this." And every time, I held him tighter, reminding him that he didn't have to carry it all alone. In spring, when the first blooms lined Central Park, we took walks holding hands openly, no longer flinching at curious stares. The world hadn't changed, but we had. We weren't asking for permission anymore. By summer, laughter filled our small apartment. Friends visited. Dinners stretched into long nights of music and messy cooking. Noah danced in the kitchen, dragging me with him, both of us ridiculous and happy. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living half a life. The final night of the story came in autumn. Exactly 1 year since the night Noah moved in with a single duffel bag and too many questions between us. We were back where it all began, in the living room, snow threatening to fall again, though not yet. He looked at me with that same quiet intensity that had once terrified me, because it saw through everything I tried to hide. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly, letting me stay. I laughed, startled by how absurd the question sounded now. Regret. I pulled him closer, pressing my forehead to his. "Noah, you were the best mistake I ever made." He smiled then, the kind of smile that reached all the way into his eyes. And I realized this wasn't just love. It was survival. It was healing. It was home. When we finally went to bed, tangled together in the dark, I dreamed again. But this time, the dream didn't scare me, because I woke up to it being real. We had begun as strangers forced to share a space. We had stumbled through fear, through guilt, through every sharp edge of love that threatens to cut before it heals. But in the end, we weren't defined by the pain. We were defined by the choice to stay, by the courage to love anyway, and by the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes the dreams we're most afraid of are the ones that end up saving us. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.